It's crazy to think how it's already been more than 10 years since Marvin Barnes passed away. However, some of the dark stuff that he tried to hide from the world is now finally coming to light. He wasn't just another random player, he was a star with real talent who somehow ended up in prison. Sounds disturbing, but let me explain. He was so good that he got picked second in the 1974 NBA draft. I mean, people couldn't believe how good he was. But instead of playing in the NBA, he joined a team in the ABA and signed a huge $2 million contract. He was super tall, super fast, and could score like crazy. Everyone in his town thought he was going to be a big star someday. But off the court, Marvin's life was a mess. He was always late, skipped flights, and got into partying. Then he started using drugs, alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine.
Using cocaine wasn't nobody looked down on you. They didn't criticize you. They looked up at you. Like, you can afford that? Oh, you must be rich. I got introduced to some drug traffickers, and I got real close with them. They became like my family. I was living my fantasy too. I always wanted to be a gangster, a drug dealer, a pimp, a player, a hustler.
He thought the drugs helped him play better, but they actually made things worse. Marvin's behavior started getting him in trouble. One time, he missed a game because he was out partying. Another time, he showed up with fast food while everyone else was warming up for a game. People started calling him Bad News Barnes because trouble followed him everywhere. Then things got really bad. Marvin's drug problem took over his life. Can you believe he was caught snorting cocaine on the bench during a game? That's how out of control things had gotten. It wasn't long before teams didn't want him anymore. He missed games, didn't show up for practices, and couldn't be trusted. The Boston Celtics let him go, and just like that, Marvin's basketball career started falling apart. Marvin made $4 million during his career, but he spent it all. He didn't save a penny. Before long, he was homeless, living on the streets, and going in and out of jail. At one point, Marvin tried to make a comeback by playing basketball in another country, but his addiction was too strong, and it kept dragging him back down. Eventually, Marvin went to a rehab center in Houston. It was run by a former basketball player who understood what Marvin was going through. For a while, Marvin stayed clean and even started helping other people who were struggling. But his old habits came back. Marvin got arrested again, this time for being involved in drug trafficking. He was sent to prison for 7 years, but only stayed for 33 months. By then, Marvin's life wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about surviving. Marvin's life had gone from being all about basketball to being all about survival. He had so much talent and so many chances to turn things around, but the bad decisions and addiction kept pulling him back. So how did it all end for Marvin? What happened after everything he'd been through? Let's talk about the final chapter of his story. His life had gone from being a dream to a nightmare. When he was young, he had everything: a big basketball career, lots of money, and fans who loved him. But all of that was gone now. After losing his basketball career, Marvin tried to find his way, but the drugs had such a strong hold on him that he couldn't escape. His addiction was like a trap he couldn't get out of. No matter how hard he tried, it always pulled him back in. Then Marvin got arrested again, this time for being involved in drug trafficking. This was a huge deal. He went from being someone kids looked up to being someone locked behind bars. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Imagine how hard that must have been for someone who used to be a star. Marvin only served about 33 months, but by the time he got out, his life had completely changed. He wasn't the same person anymore. After leaving prison, Marvin tried to clean up his life again. He went to a rehab center in Houston. The center was run by John Lucas, another basketball player who had struggled with addiction. Marvin found someone who understood what he was going through, and for a little while, it seemed like things were getting better. Marvin stayed sober for a few years and even started helping other people who were struggling with drugs. He wanted to make sure that others didn't make the same mistakes he did. For a while, it looked like Marvin had finally turned his life around. But addiction is tough. It's not something you can just forget about. And for Marvin, it was always there in the background. Even though he was trying to stay on the right path, His old habits and struggles were never too far away. On September 8, 2014, Marvin Barnes passed away. He was 62 years old. After everything he'd been through, his body couldn't handle it anymore. His old teammate, Kevin Stakem, said that Marvin had been drug-free for a few years before he died. But all the years of addiction had taken a toll on his health. It's heartbreaking to think about everything Marvin went through, how close he was to greatness, and how far he fell. Marvin's death was a sad end to a story that could have been so different. He had the talent to be one of the best basketball players ever, but his struggles with addiction and bad choices took all of that away. His story might seem unbelievable, but he wasn't the only basketball player to face struggles like this. There's a pattern you start to notice when you look at other players. Guys who were super talented but made bad choices that stopped them from reaching their full potential. Like the story of Len Bias, who was one of the best college basketball players ever. In 1986, he got picked second in the NBA draft. Just like Marvin, people were so excited to see him play in the NBA because they thought he'd be a superstar. But something terrible happened. Just 2 days after he was drafted, Len died of a cocaine overdose. It shocked everyone. He was so young and his future was so bright. Len never even got the chance to play in the NBA, but his story reminds us of Marvin in a way. Both of them were incredibly talented, but drugs stopped them from reaching their dreams. Or the story of Chris Washburn, who, like Marvin, had a problem with drugs. He started using cocaine, and it completely took over his life. In just 2 years, Chris failed 3 drug tests. The NBA had to ban him. Chris tried to come back to basketball, but it didn't work. He later admitted that he was spending thousands of dollars a week on drugs. Just like Marvin, Chris let his addiction ruin what could have been an incredible career. Do let us know if you'd like us to cover these players' stories as well in the comments section. We'd love your feedback. Here's the real truth, though. Marvin Barnes' story is about more than just basketball. It's a story about how important it is to make good choices and surround yourself with the right people. Marvin had so much potential, but his decisions kept pulling him in the wrong direction. It's also a story about how addiction can take over someone's life. Marvin's struggles show how hard it can be to break free from drugs once they take hold. Even with all the help he got, Marvin couldn't completely escape. For fans who grew up watching him play, Marvin will always be remembered as someone who made basketball exciting. But his life off the court is a reminder of how important it is to stay in control and take care of yourself. And that was the story of Marvin Barnes. It's a story about talent, mistakes, and the battle to turn things around. Marvin had his moments of greatness, but his story also shows how important it is to make good choices and get help when you need it. What do you think about Marvin's life and career? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.